Hi, today is the day of the Capricorn solstice, which is the winter solstice where I live in the Northern Hemisphere in the UK. Now, I wanted to just make a short video, a note really, about the subject of the seasonal cycle for a Satanist. And I've called it the Devil's Mill because it just seems like a poetic expression. It's not an age-old term which I'm giving to you or anything like that. As you probably know, the seasonal cycle is a very big thing in neo-paganism, and there is a developed iconography and mythology to this in a lot of Wiccan-derived neo-paganism. A lot of it focusing on the dying and resurrecting God, divine child becomes the sacrificial god, etc., etc., and the relationship to the Great Mother. Now, neither of these things play very much of a part in my religion. I don't really deal with dying gods and resurrecting gods, and I don't have a big place for the Great Mother in my spirituality, so I have a quite different take on things. But I do think that as Satanists, the seasonal cycle is something which we can celebrate, because we are, in part at least, a religion of nature, though we are also a religion of going beyond nature. So I thought I'd have a look at this, really. Starting with the solstices. The summer solstice is a time of the greatest light in terms of daylight hours, but it's also the time when the darkness starts to return. So it's a turning point. This, for me, is, I think, a time when we can celebrate the rise of the dark, which brings us all the good things in life, basically. It brings us all that's good from the point of view of light. It brings everything which has definition. It brings us love. It brings us art. It brings us maturity, all the things that we could want in many ways. But of course, we have to work for them. So I see the summer solstice as a time to celebrate that, and also as a time to celebrate iconographically the possibility of an avatar of that darkness coming into the world. And by that I mean, for instance, a teacher or a guide or what have you, that can actually bring Satan's gnosis into our lives, and to give us this sort of possibility for work and for the reward of that work. So I think I like to think of it as the time of the birth of the divine or the infernal dark child, if you like. But of course, I don't mean that in a sense of that, you know, Satan is actually born, or that the Dark Lord is actually born or dies. That's not what I mean. But in the sense of these inspirational and wisdom figures that can come into our life. And so in an abstract sense, that to me is represented by the summer solstice as well. And I very much like that idea. It's nice to have something of our own in that way. So it's the infernal child, in a sense, the infernal youthfulness, the infernal genesis, but in the material sphere. Yeah, we're not talking about abstraction and about the world beyond this. So there is that. Now, to have actually then switch over to the winter solstice, which is where we are here now in the northern hemisphere. The winter solstice is the time of the greatest darkness in terms of the length of night versus day, and it's the time also when the light starts to return after this point, so it's a turning point again. And for me, this is a time to celebrate the divine fire of passion being revived within us. So it's our fire, it's our selfhood, which is emerging and re-emerging at that time, and it's a time to actually celebrate the light within. So that is what the winter solstice represents for me. Now, in terms of what we inherit historically from law as Satanists, the two celebrations which come down to us from folklore and from our own tradition, such as it is, because obviously there are pretty scant sources, but the things that come down to us, the two that come down to us are Walpurgis Night, which is May Eve, and Halloween, which is November Eve. So these are the two that come down to us, and they are associated with a time of when witches were abroad and demons and spirits were about. And it's a time when we can celebrate this freedom, which couldn't even be suppressed in the mainstream culture. So this freedom is there, and this communion with the demons and the demonic realm and the world of spirits and with Satan. Obviously, we don't limit our communion to those times, but it's a time to, I think, celebrate these things and really have pride in ourselves as Satanists, and really welcome this communion in a formal sense. So that's what I'd say for those. These themselves are, these times I think of them as being the inaugurations of the two halves of the year, in a sense, in the earthly sense, just as the solstices inaugurate dark and light into the year, but the actual these two celebrations of Walpurgis Night and Halloween actually inaugurate the real seasons of the onset of summer and the onset of winter. That's how I look upon them. So they're very important. Now, if you actually look to the middle of summer, high summer, and what you might call high winter, we get two other points in time which are significant, and they are the ones which would be considered like Candlemas and Imelc, and which is in very early February. It's around about 15 degrees Aquarius in terms of the sun's position, and the corresponding one for summer is Lammas Lunacer, around about 15 degrees of Leo in terms of the sun's position. Now, you can look upon these as in different ways. Now, the Aquarius festival, I associate it personally. I used to associate it with the god Pan. It was quite close to Lupercalia, and you're very free to obviously associate it with that if you want to, or anything else you want. But I do feel there's a kind of correspondence there for me personally with Lilith, the demoness, queen of the demons, really, in a sense, and I think of her as the queen of interdimensional space. So she's a very important figure for me. So I could see a place for her there, really. And she's a very Aquarian figure too. And then the other side of things, in summer, well, I think of this as the time to celebrate Satan and the demonic realm in its most sensual and fecund aspects. So I think of the horn god and the god of the Sabbath in his most sexual and virile aspects. But one could also, for instance, have here the figure of Babylon, if you wanted, a fiery goddess who is, again, a great demoness. And I think this works too. Or you could combine the two, or you could have Babylon and the beast, whatever. But the thing is that in this time of high summer, it's a time of fruitfulness, it's a time of the rising darkness, and it's also a time of physical comfort and physical joy. So that's something that I would put there. Now, in terms of, you know, the other points of the neo-pagan wheel of the year, which we of course don't have to, we don't have to simulate this or put all of these points in. The other two out of the 8, which are generally quoted, would be the equinoxes. Now, the equinoxes don't have a great deal of meaning to me. In fact, they're not major ones for me. They're points I recognise, but they're not major ones for me. In occult lore, there's some people used to say that there were times when the magical current would be released at that time, so they were very significant in that way. What I would say about them is that they're times of unstable energy. The energy is moving very fast in terms of the daylight hours are changing very, very quickly. And they're changing at their maximum speed, in fact, so things are really moving quickly. They're times of transition between seasons, but there is an unstable quality to them. There's an unstable quality to the energy. I much prefer the autumn equinox. I find the spring equinox quite hard to deal with, actually, in some ways, but that's just me, you know. But the thing is, there are times of unstable energy, and that gives them, in some senses, a chaotic quality. And the thing with that is that these are times when everything is so up in the air that if you wish to use their energy and impose your will upon that energy or your intention, then I think there is a potential there, magically speaking. But they don't play a great part in a sort of iconographic or liturgical scheme for me. That seems more like a question of practical magic. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the seasonal changes. Like I said, I think it's good for Satanists to actually celebrate and enjoy the seasons as Satanists. And you can do this, you can do it however you want, but the important thing is to do what you find enjoyable and meaningful, and to follow your intuition and your gut on things. And if you wish to celebrate these times, then please do, and do so with the love of Satan and the infernal realm. Thank you very much.